The massive crystal dome of the Galactic Council chamber sparkled under 3 different suns. Inside, representatives from 47 different alien species sat in their floating chairs, arranged in perfect circles around the central speaking platform. The air hummed with translation devices working in hundreds of languages at once. Ambassador Kethvar of the Zilithian Empire stood at the center platform. His blue skin gleamed under the lights as he spoke into the floating microphone. His voice carried the tone of someone who believed he was very important. "Today we discuss the humans again," Kethvar said, his forearms gesturing dramatically. "These primitive creatures from the 3rd planet of a small yellow star." Murmurs of amusement rippled through the chamber. The Astani Collective's representative, High Counselor Erix, leaned forward in his chair. His ancient eyes, older than most civilizations, looked almost bored. "What have these humans done now?" Erix asked in his creaky voice. "Last month they were asking for more trade routes. The month before they wanted mining rights in the Outer Rim." Kethvar pressed a button on his control panel. Holographic images appeared above the platform, showing human spacecraft. The ships looked clunky and rough compared to the sleek vessels used by Council species. They were held together with metal bolts and powered by simple chemical rockets. "Look at their technology," Kethvar said, pointing at the images with disgust. "They still use nuclear fission for power. Their weapons are basic energy beams that could barely scratch our armor. Their fastest ships take months to travel distances we cover in days." More laughter echoed through the chamber. The representative from the Corvani hegemony, a massive creature covered in thick scales, slammed his fist on his chair's armrest. "Why do we even allow them in our territory?" the Corvani growled. "They waste space that real civilizations could use. Their entire species could not defeat one of our patrol fleets." In the human section of the chamber, Captain Sarah Chen sat quietly. She was a small woman by human standards, with dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Her blue uniform was plain compared to the elaborate robes and armor worn by other representatives. She held a simple tablet in her hands and occasionally made notes with a stylus. Chen had been listening to these discussions for 3 years now. Every month, the same conversation. The same jokes about human technology. The same suggestions that humanity should be grateful for any scraps the Council threw their way. "Captain Chen," Kethvar called out, his voice dripping with fake politeness. "Would you care to defend your species' recent requests for expanded territory? Surely you understand that primitive civilizations should not expect the same privileges as advanced ones." Chen looked up from her tablet. Her brown eyes showed no anger despite the insults. She stood slowly and walked to the speaking platform. "Honored representatives," she said, her voice calm and clear. "Humanity understands its place in the galaxy. We know we have much to learn from the great civilizations represented here." This seemed to please the Council members. Several nodded approvingly. "However," Chen continued, "we believe that all species, regardless of their current technology level, deserve basic respect and fair treatment." The pleasant mood in the chamber shifted. Kethvar's 4 eyes narrowed. "Respect must be earned, Captain," he said coldly. "Your species has been in space for only 50 years. Some of us here have been traveling between stars for 50,000 years. What could you possibly teach us?" Chen smiled slightly. It was not a warm smile. "We prefer to let our actions speak louder than our words, Ambassador." The Astani High Counselor leaned back in his chair. Despite his ancient age, something about the human's quiet confidence made him uneasy. But before he could speak, Kethvar pressed on. "Actions?" The Zilithian laughed. "Your greatest military achievement was defeating yourselves in your own world wars. Your most advanced spacecraft cannot even reach the edge of your own solar system without refueling." Other Council members joined in the laughter. The Corvani representative stood up, his massive frame casting a shadow across the platform. "I propose we reduce human territory by half," he announced. "They clearly cannot use the space effectively. Better to give it to species that can actually defend it." A vote was called. Chen watched as holographic markers appeared above each representative's chair. Green meant they supported reducing human territory. Red meant they opposed it. Yellow meant they abstained. The voting took less than 5 minutes. 38 green markers, 7 yellow, 2 red. "The motion passes," High Counselor Erix announced, though he looked less pleased than Chen had expected. "Human territory will be reduced by 50% within 6 months. Additionally," Kethvar added with a cruel smile, "humanity will pay tribute to the Council for the privilege of remaining in galactic space." 10% of your annual resource production, delivered to Nexus Prime every year. Chen nodded calmly, as if she had expected this outcome. She made a note on her tablet. Is there anything else the council requires? She asked politely. Yes, said the representative from the Vorthon Trade Federation, a thin creature with 6 arms and golden skin. We want detailed records of all human military assets. Ship counts, weapon specifications, defensive installations, everything. For your own protection, of course, Kethvar added, not bothering to hide his sarcasm. Chen tapped something on her tablet. A message appeared on her screen. Message sent successfully. Of course, Ambassador, she said. Humanity will comply with all council requirements. As the session ended and representatives began filing out of the chamber, High Counselor Erix approached Chen. Despite his advanced age, he moved with surprising grace. Captain, he said quietly, I have been alive for 3,000 years. I have seen many species rise and fall. There is something about your reaction today that troubles me. Chen looked up at the ancient alien. For a moment, her calm mask slipped, and Erix saw something in her eyes that made his blood run cold. It was not fear or anger. It was the look of someone who knew a secret that would change everything. High Counselor, Chen said softly, my species has a saying, still waters run deep. Perhaps it would be wise to remember that. She turned and walked away, leaving Erix standing alone in the emptying chamber. The old alien watched her go, a growing sense of unease settling in his chest. Outside the chamber, Chen walked through the corridors of Nexus Prime. The space station was a marvel of engineering, home to millions of beings from across the galaxy, but Chen barely noticed the crowds or the spectacular views of nearby star systems. She stepped into a private communication booth and activated her secure connection. The face that appeared on the screen was weathered and scarred, belonging to Admiral Elena Vasquez of the Terran Defense Force. Sarah, the Admiral said without preamble. How did it go? As expected, Chen replied. They reduced our territory and demanded tribute. They also want complete records of our military assets. Admiral Vasquez nodded grimly. And your recommendation? Chen's calm facade finally cracked, revealing a fierce determination underneath. Project Ragnarok is greenlit, Admiral. It's time to prepare for Phase 1. The transmission ended, leaving Chen alone in the small booth. Through the transparent walls, she could see Kethvar and other council members laughing together as they headed to their luxury quarters. They had no idea what was coming. In the depths of human space, far from the watching eyes of the Galactic Council, massive shipyards that had been hidden for decades began to stir with new activity. The greatest secret in human history was about to be revealed, but not yet. Not until humanity was ready. The galaxy had underestimated them for the last time. 3 months had passed since the Galactic Council's decision to reduce human territory. Deep space monitoring stations throughout the galaxy began detecting something strange. Sensor operators from a dozen different species reported the same puzzling readings. Admiral Vorthak of the Zilithian Empire studied the reports in his command center aboard the battleship Stellar Pride. His blue fingers traced patterns on the holographic display showing the outer rim territories. Red dots marked locations where unusual energy signatures had been detected. All of these readings are in human space, his aide, Commander Zilth, observed. But they appear and disappear before we can get a clear scan. Vorthak's 4 eyes focused on the display. The energy signatures were massive, far beyond anything humans should be capable of producing. According to council records, human power generation was still based on primitive fusion reactors. These readings suggested something entirely different. Could their technology have advanced this quickly? Zilth asked nervously. Impossible, Vorthak said firmly. We monitor all human communications. Their scientific journals show no breakthroughs. Their trade requests are still for basic materials and simple equipment, but the readings continued to appear. Every few days, monitoring stations would detect enormous energy spikes lasting only minutes before vanishing completely. The locations were always different, always in the empty space between human colonies. Vorthak made a decision that would change everything. Prepare the fleet, he ordered. We're going to investigate these anomalies personally. 2 weeks later, 12 Zilithian warships dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of human territory. The fleet was impressive by any standard. Each ship was over 800 meters long, armed with quantum torpedoes and plasma cannons that could crack planets. What they found defied all explanation. Floating in the void were debris fields the size of small moons. Twisted metal structures that looked like they had been torn from much larger constructions. The metal itself was strange, composed of alloys that Zilithian computers couldn't identify. "Admiral," the ship's science officer reported, her voice shaking slightly. "These materials shouldn't exist. The molecular structure is unlike anything in our databases." Vorthak examined the readings himself. The debris showed signs of advanced manufacturing techniques. Nanoscale precision in every component, materials that seemed to exist in a state between matter and energy. "How long have these debris fields been here?" he asked. "Based on radiation decay, no more than a few weeks. But Admiral, the energy readings we detected suggest whatever created this debris was enormous, far larger than anything humans have ever built." As the fleet moved deeper into human space, they discovered more troubling signs. Gravitational anomalies that suggested massive objects had recently been present. Exotic particle residue that glowed with unknown energy signatures. Construction sites that appeared to have been hastily abandoned. Most disturbing of all were the mining operations. On a small asteroid, Zilithian scanners detected excavation equipment unlike anything in human technology reports. The machines were stripping rare elements from the rock with impossible efficiency. Materials that should have taken years to extract were being processed in hours. "Admiral," Commander Zilth said quietly, "our intelligence reports say humans are still struggling to mine basic iron and copper efficiently. This level of technology is beyond most Council species." That's when they detected the human ship. The Merchant's Dream was a typical human cargo vessel according to their records, 300 meters long, powered by a simple fusion drive, carrying trade goods between human colonies. It appeared on their sensors exactly as expected. But Admiral Vorthak had learned not to trust appearances. "Intercept that vessel," he ordered. "I want to speak with its captain." The human ship didn't try to run. It simply stopped and waited as the Zilithian fleet surrounded it. The captain's face appeared on their communication screen within minutes. Captain Marcus Webb was a middle-aged human with graying hair and laugh lines around his eyes. He wore a simple blue uniform and smiled pleasantly at the Zilithian admiral. "Can I help you, Admiral?" Webb asked politely. "Are we in restricted space? My navigation charts don't show any boundaries here." "You are in territory claimed by the Galactic Council for investigation," Vorthak replied coldly. "We're studying unusual energy readings in this area." "What do you know about them?" Webb's expression remained perfectly innocent. "Energy readings? I'm afraid I don't know anything about that, Admiral. We're just simple merchants transporting cargo to human colonies." "Simple merchants," Vorthak repeated slowly. "Captain Webb, would you mind if we examined your cargo holds?" "Of course not. We have nothing to hide." But Vorthak's scanners had already detected something that made his blood run cold. The Merchant's Dream might look like a simple cargo ship, but its hull composition was anything but simple. Ultra-dense polymers that could withstand direct hits from plasma cannons. Quantum-aligned metals that most Council species couldn't produce. When Zilithian soldiers boarded the human ship, they found the cargo holds filled with ordinary trade goods. Food supplies, basic manufactured items, entertainment media. Nothing that shouldn't be there, except for one small detail. Hidden among the cargo containers, Vorthak's soldiers found a single metal plate. It was no larger than a human hand, but when they analyzed it, their equipment nearly overloaded. The metal existed in 7 dimensions simultaneously. It contained more compressed energy than a small star. "Captain Webb," Vorthak said when they returned to his ship with their prisoner, "this metal plate was found in your cargo hold. Would you care to explain how simple merchants acquired materials that exist beyond normal spacetime?" Webb examined the plate with apparent surprise. "I've never seen that before, Admiral. Perhaps one of my crew picked it up somewhere? You know how it is with space debris. Sometimes interesting things float by. Space debris." Vorthak's voice was dangerously quiet. "Captain, this single plate contains enough energy to power one of our battleships for a year. Where did you really get it?" For the first time since his capture, Webb's pleasant expression changed. The smile remained, but something shifted in his eyes. Something that reminded Vorthak uncomfortably of a predator that had been pretending to be prey. "You know, Admiral," Webb said casually, "my grandfather used to tell me stories about the old days on Earth. He fought in something called World War II. Nasty business, that." He used to say that the biggest mistake you can make in a fight is underestimating someone who has nothing left to lose. Webb paused, looking directly at Vorthak with eyes that suddenly seemed much older and more dangerous than before. But he also said, there's an even bigger mistake than that, underestimating someone who's been preparing for 100 years. Before Vorthak could respond, his ship's sensors detected massive hyperspace disturbances throughout human territory, energy signatures that dwarfed anything they had seen before. Not one or two anomalies, but dozens. Hundreds. "Admiral," his science officer called out, her voice filled with panic. "Massive objects are moving throughout human space. The energy readings are off our scales." Webb smiled wider. "Oh, looks like the night shift is starting their patrol routes. You might want to head back to Council Space, Admiral. Things are about to get very busy out here." "What's really happening in human space?" Vorthak demanded. Webb stood up slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. Despite being a prisoner surrounded by armed aliens, he looked completely relaxed. "Admiral, has it ever occurred to you that maybe, just maybe, humanity isn't quite as primitive as you think we are?" The lights on Vorthak's ship flickered as another massive energy signature passed nearby. Through the observation windows, they could see space itself seeming to bend and twist as something enormous moved through hyperspace. Webb walked to the window and looked out at the distorted space with satisfaction. "You've been watching us for 50 years, he said quietly, "studying our technology, monitoring our communications, keeping track of our little ships and their cute chemical rockets." He turned back to face Vorthak, and the Zilithian admiral took an involuntary step backward. "But here's the thing about humans, Admiral. We're very good at showing people exactly what we want them to see." The hyperspace disturbances were getting stronger. Vorthak's fleet was starting to show signs of strain as gravitational waves from the massive moving objects washed over them. "I recommend you return to Council Space immediately," Webb said calmly. "And, Admiral?" "You might want to suggest that the Council reconsider their recent decisions about human territory." As the Zilithian fleet prepared to retreat, Webb was returned to his ship. Before the merchant's dream departed, he sent one final message to Admiral Vorthak. "Oh, and Admiral, that metal plate your soldiers found? You can keep it as a gift. Consider it a small sample of what humanity is actually capable of." The human cargo ship vanished into hyperspace, leaving the Zilithian fleet alone with their terrifying discoveries and more questions than answers. Fleet Admiral Thosani of the Corvani hegemony was not a patient creature. Standing 3 meters tall and covered in thick armored scales, he had built his reputation on swift, brutal victories. When the Galactic Council's intelligence reports about strange activities in human space reached his command, he saw an opportunity. "Weak species require strong guidance," he growled to his staff aboard the flagship Eternal Conquest. "The humans have been hiding something from the Council. It's time to remind them why honest species prosper while sneaky ones are crushed." The Corvani dreadnought fleet was an impressive sight. 48 massive warships arranged in perfect attack formation, their hulls gleaming black in the light of distant stars. Each ship was a kilometer long and armed with weapons that could reduce planets to rubble. The Eternal Conquest led them all, a monstrous vessel that had never known defeat. The fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system. Their sensors immediately detected the expected human defenses: a handful of orbital stations around Earth, some mining platforms in the asteroid belt, and perhaps 24 small patrol ships. Thosani examined the readings with satisfaction. Even if humans had been hiding some new technology, they were still vastly outnumbered and outgunned. "Open a channel to all human frequencies," he commanded. His massive form filled the communication screen as his message broadcast across the entire solar system. "Humans of the third planet," his voice rumbled like an earthquake, "you have been judged unworthy of independence. Your species has lied to the Galactic Council about your capabilities. This deception ends now. Submit immediately and your deaths will be swift. Resist and we will make your final hours last for days." The response came not from Earth but from somewhere in the outer system. The voice was calm, professional, and completely unintimidated by the massive fleet bearing down on humanity's homeworld. "This is Admiral Elena Vasquez of the Terran Defense Force. You are trespassing in human sovereign space. You have one opportunity to withdraw." Thosani's laughter shook the bridge of his flagship. His officers joined in, the sound of their amusement echoing through the ship's corridors. "Admiral Vasquez," he said, still chuckling, My sensors show your pathetic fleet. 24 ships against 48 dreadnoughts. Are you truly so foolish as to threaten us? I am giving you a chance to leave with your lives and your honor intact, Admiral Vasquez replied calmly. This is not a threat. This is a professional courtesy. The Corvani Admiral's laughter died. The sheer audacity of this human was almost impressive. Almost. Very well, Admiral. You have chosen the hard way. Prepare to learn why the Corvani hegemony has never lost a war. Thosani turned to his weapons officer. Target the human ships. Destroy them all. Save the planet for last. I want them to watch their protectors die before we finish this. Admiral, his sensor operator called out, confusion clear in her voice. I'm detecting some kind of massive structure in the asteroid belt. It wasn't there a moment ago. Thosani moved to the sensor station. The readings made no sense. According to the display, something enormous was emerging from what they had thought was a natural asteroid field. Enhance magnification, he ordered. The main screen focused on the asteroid belt, and Thosani's confident smile vanished. What they had assumed was a collection of space rocks was unfolding like some impossible mechanical flower. Camouflage systems that had fooled even their advanced sensors were powering down, revealing the truth beneath. It was a ship. But calling it a ship was like calling a hurricane a breeze. The vessel stretched 8 kilometers from bow to stern. Its hull was a dark gray that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Weapon emplacements covered every surface, some so large they could have housed Corvani fighters. Shield generators hummed with power that made space itself shimmer around the massive craft. Impossible, Thosani whispered. No species builds ships that large. The structural stresses alone would tear it apart. But the evidence was right in front of them. The human ship was not only intact, it was beautiful in a terrifying way. Every line spoke of power held in check. Every weapon mount promised destruction beyond imagination. Admiral, the communications officer called out. We're receiving a transmission from the human vessel. Admiral Vasquez appeared on their screen again. Behind her, they could see the bridge of the massive ship. Humans moved calmly at their stations, monitoring displays that showed energy readings beyond Corvani understanding. This is the TSDF Ragnarok, Vasquez said, her voice carrying a weight that hadn't been there before. You are looking at humanity's first Titan-class battleship. It represents 50 years of preparation and a level of technology your species cannot comprehend. She paused, letting the implications sink in. This is your final warning. Withdraw now, or face the consequences of forcing humanity to reveal what we are truly capable of. Thosani stared at the screen, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. The human ship was larger than some of the space stations used by Council species. Its power readings were beyond measurement, and according to Admiral Vasquez, it was their first ship of this class, implying there would be others. But Thosani was a Corvani warrior. Retreat was not in his vocabulary. Impressive theatrics, Admiral, he snarled. One large ship against an entire fleet. You may have fooled the Council with your deceptions, but you cannot fool physics. No single vessel, however large, can stand against 48 dreadnoughts. Vasquez's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes. Something that reminded him of the look a predator gives its prey just before striking. Admiral Thosani, she said quietly, you are about to learn the difference between large ships and advanced ships. The Corvani Admiral turned to his weapons officer. All ships, open fire. Everything we have. Turn that oversized target into scrap metal. The Corvani fleet unleashed hell itself. 48 dreadnoughts fired simultaneously. Their combined firepower enough to crack moons. Plasma cannons that could melt mountains. Quantum torpedoes that could phase through solid matter. Gravitational bombs that could compress matter to neutron star density. All of it struck the Ragnarok at once. The massive human ship didn't even shudder. Energy weapons that should have melted armor simply vanished against shields that bent space around the vessel. Torpedoes that should have punched through any defense were absorbed by barrier fields that operated on principles Corvani science couldn't explain. Most impossibly of all, the shield seemed to be getting stronger with each hit. Status report, Thosani roared. Sir, our weapons are having no effect, his tactical officer reported, his voice shaking. Their shields are adapting to each attack. Whatever we hit them with, they become immune to it. On the communication screen, Admiral Vasquez looked almost sad. Admiral, your weapons are designed to fight ships built with technology you understand. The Ragnarok operates on principles that won't be discovered by your species for another 1,000 years. Space around the Titan-class battleship began to ripple and bend. Weapon ports along its hull started to glow with energy that made sensors overload just trying to measure it. However, Vasquez continued, since you have chosen to ignore our warnings and threaten innocent civilians, we will now demonstrate why this ship was named after the end of worlds. The Ragnarok fired the quantum cascade cannons, unleashed beams of pure destruction that didn't just penetrate Corvani shields, they reached through dimensional space and struck the ships from directions that shouldn't have existed. 3 dreadnoughts simply ceased to exist, not destroyed but removed from reality itself. Gravitational weapons reached out invisible hands and crushed 4 more ships like tin cans, compressing them into balls of super-dense matter that glowed white-hot before cooling into perfect spheres. The most terrifying weapon was something the humans called the reality anchor. Space around 10 Corvani ships simply froze. The vessels hung motionless, their crews trapped in temporal stasis, unable to move or think or even realize what had happened to them. In less than 5 minutes, 17 ships of the mighty Corvani dreadnought fleet had been neutralized. Ceasefire, Thosani broadcast desperately. We surrender. We yield. The terrible weapons of the Ragnarok fell silent. Admiral Vasquez appeared on his screen again. Her expression was professional, but Thosani could see the steel beneath. Admiral, your remaining ships will power down their weapons and prepare to be boarded. Your crews will receive medical treatment and be returned to Corvani space unharmed. Consider this a lesson in the consequences of threatening peaceful civilizations. As Corvani warriors who had never known defeat prepared to surrender to a single human ship, Thosani realized that everything the galaxy thought it knew about humanity had been wrong. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a terrifying thought began to form. If this was what humans could build when they were hiding, what were they capable of when they stopped pretending to be weak? The battle was over in 17 minutes. Admiral Vasquez stood on the bridge of the TSDF Ragnarok, watching as her crew efficiently processed the surrender of the Corvani fleet. Around her, holographic displays showed the status of each enemy ship, 17 destroyed or neutralized, 31 disabled but with crews intact. Medical teams to Shuttle Bay 7, she announced calmly. Prepare to receive Corvani wounded. I want full medical support for all survivors. Her weapons officer, Commander Park, looked up from his station. Admiral, the quantum cascade cannons are fully recharged. Should we finish the remaining ships? Negative, Vasquez replied firmly. We've made our point. These beings came here believing they were conducting a military operation against a weak species. They now understand their error. Further killing would serve no purpose. On the main screen, the wreckage of Corvani dreadnoughts drifted in the cold vacuum of space. But even in victory, Admiral Vasquez felt no satisfaction. She had hoped it would never come to this. The communication board lit up with incoming messages from across the galaxy. News of the battle was spreading faster than light speed itself, carried by quantum communication networks that connected every major civilization. Admiral, her communications officer called out, we're receiving priority transmissions from the Galactic Council, the Astani Collective, the Zilithian Empire, and at least 20 other species. They all want immediate explanations. Route them all to Captain Chen on Nexus Prime, Vasquez ordered. She's better suited for diplomatic discussions than I am. What the Admiral didn't mention was the message she had received from Earth Command just before the battle began. The Corvani attack had been expected, but it was only the beginning. Intelligence reports suggested that other aggressive species were already mobilizing their fleets, planning to test humanity's newfound strength. Commander Park, she said quietly, what's the status of the other Titan-class vessels? The Mjolnir will be operational within 6 months, Park reported. The Excalibur is undergoing final weapons testing. The Gungnir is still in the construction phase, but her hull is complete. And the orbital defense platform's installation is proceeding ahead of schedule. The Sol system will be fully protected within the year. Vasquez nodded, but her expression remained troubled. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity possessed technology far beyond what anyone had imagined. Some species would accept this new reality peacefully. Others would see it as a threat that needed to be eliminated. On Nexus Prime, the Galactic Council was in emergency session. The massive chamber that usually echoed with casual conversation and political maneuvering was now filled with panicked voices speaking in dozens of languages. High Counselor Erix floated in his chair at the center of the chamber, his ancient eyes studying the holographic recordings of the battle. The images were clear and undeniable. A single human ship had destroyed 17 Corvani dreadnoughts without taking any damage. This changes everything, Representative Keller of the Vorthon Trade Federation was saying, her 6 arms gesturing frantically. If humans possess this level of technology, every territorial agreement in the galaxy needs to be reconsidered. Ambassador Kethvar sat in stunned silence. His blue skin had turned pale gray and his forearms trembled slightly as he replayed the battle footage. The weapon that had simply erased 3 Corvani ships from existence operated on principles that Zilithian science couldn't even theorize about. The question, said General Thrak of the Mordian Alliance, is how long have they possessed these capabilities? Have we been dealing with a deception for decades? The chamber fell quiet as Captain Chen entered through the main doors. She walked calmly to the central speaking platform, her simple uniform unchanged, her expression as serene as always. But now everyone in the chamber looked at her with new eyes. She was no longer the representative of a primitive species asking for scraps. She was the voice of a civilization that could apparently challenge the entire galaxy. Honored representatives, Chen began, her voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. I understand you have questions about recent events. Questions? Ambassador Kethvar finally found his voice, though it cracked with emotion. Captain Chen, your species just demonstrated technology that makes our most advanced weapons look like children's toys. How is this possible? Chen activated her tablet, and holographic displays appeared throughout the chamber. They showed star maps, but not the ones the Council was familiar with. These maps revealed human colonies and star systems that supposedly contained nothing but empty space. Industrial complexes hidden behind sensor screens. Defensive installations that had been invisible to Council monitoring. The answer is simple, Ambassador, Chen replied. You classified us as a Class C civilization 50 years ago. You were wrong. We allowed you to be wrong. The implications hit the chamber like a physical blow. Species representatives looked at each other with growing alarm as Chen continued her presentation. Humanity has been spacefaring for over 300 years, not 50, she explained. The ships you've been monitoring, the technology you've been studying, the industrial reports we've been filing, all of it was carefully selected to present exactly the image we wanted you to see. High Counselor Erix leaned forward in his chair. Despite his shock, his ancient mind was beginning to understand the scope of what had happened. You've been deceiving us for decades, he said quietly. But why? Chen's holographic displays shifted, showing historical records of galactic politics, wars of conquest, entire species enslaved or destroyed by more powerful neighbors. The Council's own policies of restricting lesser civilizations to prevent them from becoming threats. We learned about your existence long before you discovered us, High Counselor, Chen said. Our first radio telescopes detected your communications networks over 2 centuries ago. We studied your languages, your politics, your history. She paused, letting that information sink in. What we learned was that advanced civilizations in this galaxy have a pattern. They either absorb weaker species or eliminate them entirely. We decided that humanity would not fall victim to that pattern. The chamber erupted in voices as representatives tried to speak at once. Chen waited patiently for order to be restored before continuing. So we prepared, she said simply. We built our real civilization far from your monitoring stations. We developed technology using principles you hadn't discovered yet. And most importantly, we prepared for the day when deception would no longer be enough. Ambassador Kethvar stood up, his forearms spread wide in a gesture of confused desperation. But the energy costs alone, he protested. The resources required to build ships like your Ragnarok. Where did you get the materials? The power sources? We've had 300 years to mine the resources of thousands of star systems, Chen replied calmly. As for power, our fusion technology is not the primitive system we allowed you to observe. We harness controlled singularities, zero-point energy, and quantum vacuum fluctuations. The scientific terms meant little to most council members, but their implications were staggering. Humanity had access to energy sources that dwarfed anything available to other species. Captain Chen, High Counselor Erix said slowly, how many ships like the Ragnarok do you possess? Chen smiled slightly. It was the same expression she had worn 3 months ago when Kethvar had mocked human capabilities. Enough, High Counselor. The silence that followed was deafening. Every representative in the chamber was now calculating the implications. If humanity possessed multiple ships of this class, they could challenge not just individual species but the entire galactic order. But Chen wasn't finished. However, she continued, humanity does not seek conquest or domination. We built our fleets for one purpose only, to ensure that never again would any species face the choice between submission and extinction. She activated a new set of holographic displays showing technical specifications and energy readings. But these weren't weapon systems. They were defensive technologies beyond anything the Council had ever seen. We proposed the formation of a new Galactic Defense Initiative, Chen announced. Shared technology and cooperative defensive systems that would protect all species from external threats and internal aggression. The proposal was revolutionary. For the first time in galactic history, a species with overwhelming military superiority was offering to share its advantages rather than exploit them. And if we refuse this proposal? General Thrak asked suspiciously. Chen's expression didn't change, but somehow her presence seemed to fill the entire chamber. Then humanity will defend itself just as we always have, she replied. But we hope that won't be necessary. The galaxy is vast enough for all of us, General, if we're willing to treat each other as equals. As the session ended and representatives dispersed to their private chambers, High Counselor Irix remained behind. He approached Chen as she prepared to leave. Captain, he said quietly, I've lived for 3,000 years. I've seen civilizations rise and fall. What your species has accomplished is unprecedented. But I must ask, what assurance do we have that humanity will use this power responsibly? Chen looked at the ancient alien with genuine respect. Despite his shock and confusion, he was asking the right questions. High Counselor, 3 months ago your council reduced our territory and demanded tribute payments. You treated us as a conquered people. Today, after demonstrating that we possess the power to challenge every species in this galaxy, we're offering to share our technology and protect your civilizations. She paused, then added softly, I believe our actions speak for themselves. As Chen left the chamber, Eric stood alone among the empty chairs. Around him, the holographic displays continued to show the impossible truth. Humanity was not the primitive species they had believed, but a civilization that had been preparing for galactic politics since before many council members were born. And now they would have to learn to live in a galaxy where humans were not the weakest species, but potentially the strongest. The old order was ending. What came next would depend on how quickly the galaxy could accept a new reality, where strength and wisdom could exist together. The Galactic Council chamber had never been so quiet. Every seat was filled, representatives from 47 different species sitting in tense silence. The emergency session had been called after 3 days of frantic communications between every major civilization in the galaxy. Captain Chen stood at the central platform, but she was no longer alone. Behind her, holographic projections showed the bridges of 4 massive vessels. Admiral Vasquez appeared from the TSDF Ragnarok. Admiral Harrison commanded the TSDF Mjolnir. Admiral Kimura stood ready aboard the TSDF Excalibur. Admiral Petrov oversaw operations from the TSDF Gungnir, 4 Titan-class battleships, each one capable of challenging entire fleets, each one proof that humanity's power was not limited to a single vessel. Honored representatives, Chen began, her voice carrying the weight of revealed truth. 3 days ago, you learned that humanity is not the primitive species you believed us to be. Today we offer you the complete truth about our civilization and our place in this galaxy. She activated her tablet, and the chamber filled with holographic displays unlike anything the Council had ever seen. Star charts showing the true extent of human space, not the handful of colonies they had been monitoring, but hundreds of systems with thriving populations and advanced industries. For over 2 centuries, Chen explained, humanity has been preparing for this moment. We knew that eventually our deception would be discovered. We knew that some species would view our emergence as a threat to be eliminated. Ambassador Kethvar sat rigid in his chair, his blue skin pale with shock. Beside him, other representatives stared at the displays with growing comprehension of just how completely they had been misled. The question before us now, Chen continued, is how we move forward together. Do we continue the old patterns of conquest and subjugation, or do we build something new? High Counselor Irix floated forward in his chair, his ancient voice carrying clearly through the chamber. Captain Chen, your species has demonstrated power that none of us imagined possible. You could demand anything from this council. Territory, resources, submission. Instead, you offer cooperation. Why? Chen smiled, and for the first time since the revelations began, it was a warm expression free of hidden meanings. Because, High Counselor, humanity learned long ago that true strength comes not from dominating others, but from protecting them. She gestured to the holographic displays, which shifted to show historical records from Earth itself. Images of wars, conflicts, and the gradual realization that cooperation achieved more than conquest. Our species nearly destroyed itself learning that lesson, Chen admitted. We fought wars that killed millions, built weapons that could have ended our entire civilization, but we survived those dark times and emerged with a new understanding. The displays changed again, showing the construction yards where the Titan-class ships had been built. But now the Council could see the full picture, not just weapons of war, but defensive systems designed to protect rather than conquer. Every weapon on our ships can be configured for planetary defense, Admiral Vasquez explained from her holographic projection. Every shield system can be adapted to protect space stations and colonies. Our quantum cascade technology can create barriers that make entire star systems impregnable to invasion. And you're willing to share this technology? Asked Representative Keller of the Vorthan Trade Federation, her 6 arms gesturing with barely controlled excitement. We're not just willing, Chen replied. We're insisting on it. The chamber erupted in surprised voices. Chen waited for order to be restored before continuing. The Galactic Defense Initiative will be a cooperative effort, she announced. Every species that wishes to participate will receive access to defensive technologies, appropriate to their level of development. In return, we ask only for mutual respect and a commitment to peaceful coexistence. General Thrak of the Mordian Alliance stood up, his massive form intimidating even by alien standards. And if some species refuse to cooperate, he demanded, if they choose to use their traditional methods of expansion and conquest? The 4 human admirals looked at each other across their communication links. Admiral Vasquez spoke for all of them. Then they will discover that the galaxy now has protectors who will not allow innocent species to be enslaved or destroyed. The implications were clear. The age of aggressive expansion was ending, whether aggressors liked it or not. But Chen had one more surprise for the Council. There's something else you need to know, she said, activating a final set of holographic displays. Humanity is not the only species that has been hiding its true capabilities. The chamber fell silent as the displays showed intelligence reports from across the galaxy. The Altarian Confederation, supposedly a peaceful trading civilization, possessed cloaking technology decades ahead of anything the Council had seen. The Benthic Collective, thought to be primitive ocean dwellers, had developed biotechnology that could rival mechanical systems. Even some Council member species had hidden research programs and classified technologies. It seems, Chen observed with dry humor, that many civilizations learned the same lesson humanity did. In a galaxy where strength is often met with fear and aggression, it's sometimes wiser to appear weak until you're ready to defend yourself. High Counselor Irix began to laugh. It started as a quiet chuckle but grew into full-bodied laughter that echoed through the chamber. Soon other representatives were joining in, the tension of the past few days finally breaking. So we've all been lying to each other, Irix said, wiping tears from his ancient eyes. A galaxy full of civilizations pretending to be less than they are, all afraid of what would happen if they revealed their true capabilities. Which suggests, Chen said as the laughter subsided, that most of us want the same thing. Peace, prosperity, and the freedom to develop without fear of conquest or destruction. The vote on the Galactic Defense Initiative was unanimous. Every species present agreed to participate in the new cooperative framework. Even General Thrak, whose people had built their reputation on military conquest, voted in favor. The Mordian Alliance has fought for centuries to protect our territory, he explained. If this initiative can provide that protection through cooperation instead of constant warfare, we support it completely. Over the following months, the transformation of galactic politics exceeded even humanity's optimistic projections. Species that had been enemies for millennia began working together on joint defense projects. Technologies that had been closely guarded secrets were shared freely. The Council's restrictive policies toward developing civilizations were completely reformed. Most importantly, the revelation that many species possessed hidden capabilities led to a new era of honesty in galactic relations. Without the fear of being conquered by stronger neighbors, civilizations could develop openly and contribute their unique strengths to the common good. Admiral Vasquez stood on the observation deck of the Ragnarok, 6 months after the first battle. Through the transparent aluminum windows, she could see an impossible sight. Human and alien engineers working side by side on a new class of defensive platforms. Silithian quantum technology combined with human gravitational manipulation. Corvani armor systems enhanced with Altarian cloaking fields. "Admiral," Captain Webb said as he joined her at the observation windows. The former merchant captain now wore the uniform of the Galactic Defense Force, a new organization that drew personnel from every participating species. "How do you think our ancestors would react to this scene?" Webb asked, gesturing toward the mixed crews working together. Vasquez smiled. "I think they'd be proud that we finally learned to build shields instead of swords." "But we still have the swords," Webb pointed out, nodding toward the weapon emplacements that lined the Ragnarok's hull. "Yes," Vasquez agreed. "And we always will. Because sometimes the only way to preserve peace is to make the cost of war too high for anyone to pay." In the engineering sections of the defense platform, a young Zilithian cadet worked alongside her human instructor, learning to calibrate quantum field generators. The technology was beyond anything her species had developed independently, but the humans shared it freely with all their allies. "Instructor Chen," the cadet asked during a break in their work, "how did your species stay hidden for so long? How did you fool every intelligence service in the galaxy?" The instructor, a descendant of Captain Chen's family, smiled at the familiar question. It was asked by every alien cadet who learned the true history of humanity's emergence. "It wasn't about being clever or sneaky," Chen replied. "It was about understanding something that most civilizations forget. The strongest position isn't necessarily the most visible one." She gestured toward the mixed crews working around them, human and alien engineers solving problems together that neither could have tackled alone. True strength doesn't come from having the biggest weapons or the largest fleets. It comes from making sure that everyone around you is stronger too. The young Zilithian considered this wisdom as they returned to their work. Around them, the galaxy's first truly cooperative defense network continued to grow, protected by ships whose very names had become symbols of hope rather than fear. The Ragnarok and her sister ships still patrolled the galaxy's borders, their massive hulks a reminder that peace had guardians who would not allow it to be broken. But their real success wasn't measured in battles won or enemies defeated. It was measured in the fact that for the first time in galactic history, no species went to sleep fearing that tomorrow they might wake up as slaves or not wake up at all. The galaxy had learned a new lesson, that the greatest victory wasn't conquering your enemies but turning them into friends. And humanity, the species that everyone had underestimated, had taught them all that sometimes the mightiest weapon of all is the wisdom to know when not to use it. The age of conquest was over. The age of cooperation had begun, and it all started because a small, supposedly primitive species had spent centuries preparing for a moment when they would have to choose between hiding forever and revealing the truth that would change everything. They had chosen truth, and the galaxy was better for it.